Prasadi. I'm city engineer for the city of Westfield. I hope everybody's doing okay, though there are some with some technical difficulties. It seems like we're having a decent turnout, and I appreciate everybody showing up to add to this discussion. So the meeting this evening is on how do we then extend the Columbia Greenway to Southampton Road to connect to a state Mass DOT project that will then connect up to the Southampton multi-use trail being worked on there to complete the circuit, if you would, the north-south connector all the way up to the Norwalk and to the Central Mass Trail system. So we have this evening with us to help expedite Stephanie. Sorry. There you go. Sorry. So Stephanie Wire, did I say that right? Thank you. Stephanie Wire. From Tool Design. They have been gracious to assist us with this effort. Tool Design is a well-known, prominent designer in the pedestrian bicycle off-road design field, as well as others, but well-known particularly. So what we're looking for then is to have them to help us to expedite and pull together and to recommend how we move forward then to make that connection. And with that, Stephanie, I think I will leave off to you. If I'm sorry, the list is pretty large. If there are any elected officials that would like to speak, please say so now, or we'll get started. I'm not hearing anyone, so Stephanie, thank you. Please do.
Okay, give me just a second to share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see my screen? I'm gonna nod. Cool. Thank you. So again, my name is Stephanie Wire. I'm a landscape architect at Tool Design. Tool being an active transportation consultant, we do a lot of work from high-level planning down to construction detailing, construction administration, and everything concerning walking, biking, rolling, strolling, really focusing on making routes that are intuitive and comfortable and safe. So tonight's presentation is just to kick off this project, the feasibility study project. I'm going to just kind of tell you about the project. Give you the timeline, give you a sense of the process we're going to be going through. And then we have visited the field, kind of a large study area, give you some of our observations and just things we're thinking about. And then just what's coming next. And then really what I want to focus on tonight is hearing from you. Just as a plug, and this will be plugged later on as well, we have a survey. It looks like already over 80 people have taken this survey because it has been advertised on Twitter, the city's website, and on notings around town, or flyers around town. So it's really great. Would love for you to participate as well. At the end of the presentation, I'll put the link in the chat, and this will come up again. But please give us your feedback there. So just to kind of start us off, Mark already gave you a bit of an overview. It is the Westfield Engineering Department with Mark leading and Matt Gamelli, who we will be working with. The funding for this comes out of the Mass Trails grant. Mass Trails being an interagency body have listed the different agencies here, but essentially they're all working together to try to expand trails and the thoughtfulness and the guidance behind them throughout Massachusetts, and they provide annual grants that have to be applied for. And so the city put in a good application and they won funding to do this feasibility study. And our hard stop for this project is June 30th, 2022. I'll talk a little bit about that, how that breaks down. Generally, what has to fit into that timeline is that the feasibility study is the final deliverable. So we're in this early phase process. We will not be getting to detailed design, not getting to construction documents, just producing to start some trail route alternatives, so different options for where this connector could go, and defining kind of what needs to be part of that trail, what are the features we want along it. We'll take that back to you and get your input on those different alternatives, and then we'll come up with the recommended design alternatives. So the particular route that we're gonna wanna then develop a little bit more in conceptual form and attach some costs to that. And then as part of the final feasibility study, we'll be including permitting information and what are the next steps to help this move into design and construction. So just with the city's timeline, we'll actually have the bulk of the project done by late February 2022. Essentially, we'll kind of get to the point where we have at least a recommended design alternative. The final report really probably won't be fully finalized until May. The public meeting schedule, we have our first meeting tonight to really just get things going and hear from you. We're going to take the input we get from you tonight and from the survey and from the different data collection we've been doing in the background to then inform those trail route alternatives. And so the second meeting, which we're hoping to hold in mid-January, will be us presenting those route alternatives to you and then getting your feedback on those. And then it'll be early to mid-February where we're coming back to present what is the recommended design alternative. So this study area is a little nebulous, but generally we want to get from point A to point B. So the Women's Temperance Park, across the bridge, the connection to an existing trail, the Columbia Greenway Rail Trail. We want to get up here to Southampton Road, Route 10-202. This is at the entrance to Southampton Elementary School, the intermediate school. And MassDOT, as some of you might have been hearing as you were waiting to start, it has a project going on along the interchange where they are going to be creating more of a complete street environment throughout here. So we're connecting into that a bit. But the question tonight is, where does that connection go? So we're going to talk a little bit about more what goes into that. But what's really important about this connector, and I'm sure a lot of you know this, is that we are trying to form a regional path network. The Columbia Greenway Rail Trail is existing. We have a bit of the Levy Park existing now, and a path that will be built out along Westfield River on the south side. You have other planned paths. These things are all pages on the city's website. Western Avenue, Court Street. There will be shared use paths along there. Southampton Road, the intention by the state is to create a fully shared use path connected road that will lead all the way up through Southampton into East Hampton to the Manhattan Rail Trail. So this is the planning that we're focused on is where is this route going as part of that regional network. So, that's the purpose of this project, is to identify the route. The goals, I'd love to get your feedback toward, when we get to the discussion period on what should the goals of this project be. We've got some suggested goals here. Essentially, we want to fill a multimodal gap and give vulnerable users, people walking and biking, a way to get between the existing Columbia Greenway and the proposed Southampton shared use path, the rail trail. We want to provide a safe and universally accessible corridor, and we want to make sure that that's serving multiple uses. It's a recreational path in and of itself, but connecting you to recreation destinations. It's going to be part of a regional network that is going to be kind of a bigger tourism network, but also a way to kind of tour around Westfield. And then, of course, some of you would be able to use this for your work commutes or even taking kids to school, since this does connect to schools. And as part of that, we want to be increasing ways for people to get around Westfield, particularly those who don't have cars or young kids or people with disabilities. So that's a great reason to have a trail. And then, of course, it's also contributing to reduced carbon emissions. So we want to design a trail that is both contributing in the sense that it's a trail, but also set out some principles as part of the feasibility study for maybe some of the aspects of it going forward that contribute to reduced emissions as well. So this is just going to be brief, some kind of high level observations and things we're thinking about. You can see here there are some different dot colors. It's a little hard to see, just a couple non-injury crashes kind of dotted around, but generally when we focus on crashes, we're taking MassDOT statewide available data. You can go online and find it yourselves. To look at where are the injuries and fatalities. And we do look at them for all users, including drivers. In this case, this map is just summarizing crashes that involved pedestrians and cyclists. They're actually, and this is covering the period of 2016 to 2021. We generally look at about 5 years. I can tell you there are actually hundreds of crashes involving motor vehicles within this study area. But it's just worth kind of seeing visually that really all around the study area, we have crashes that involve injuries, one fatality on Notre Dame Street here, that involve people on bikes or people walking. And generally, when we look at crash data, we're looking at it to kind of inform us where are the safety issues that we need to be focusing on. We also are going to be, considering the different character of the street and what's going on along the streets that are involved in this. The area, as we kind of surveyed it now, just going around on a number of different roadways, we're seeing where this trail is definitely going to go through a number of different street environments. On neighborhood streets, we wouldn't be looking to build something separated. It would be signage and pavement markings, but something that is on what are essentially quiet streets and nice family connections. Whereas when we're looking at collectors and arterials, a lot of the bigger roads that you're using to get around Westfield, we have to really start considering what is the level of separation that we need for the path? What side of the road does it go on? And that's based on where are your utilities? Where is the challenging topography? If you have a sea of pavement, does any of that get removed? Do we take a lane to provide us some space? So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about, and I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on limitations you see or areas of concern you see. As part of that, we're also looking specifically at intersections and crossings. You have a lot of pavement and a lot of fast-moving vehicles on many of your roads. There are a lot of different ways we can address that, from just doing basic assessments of, is there a crossing? Can you see the crossing? If you can't see the crossing, what are the improvements that need to be made? All the way up to kind of changing a little bit of the geometry of the intersection to tighten curb radii, but knowing what are the vehicles that still need to make it through, like school buses coming out of this entry to the schools. So we'll consider all of those things, or if there isn't a crosswalk and it's a decent crosswalk, does it need something like rectangular rapid flashing beacons? So those are the yellow signs that have the flashing lights under them to help make it more visible. So lots of things we can do at intersections and crossings. So we'll be assessing more of those once we get into the route alternatives. I-90 it's a challenge. We're looking at 3 possibilities right now of where we could cross: 2 underpasses, 1 overpass. We not only have to look at what is the underpass or overpass itself and what's going on there, but then what does that imply in terms of the connections going in or out. So this is the railway, Lockhouse Road, Route 20210, Southampton Road. In each case, we have major challenges from kind of narrow right-of-way, along a railway, we would have to be kind of within the structure. There are a lot of implications just in dealing with railway property and the requirements they have for construction. Lockhouse Road is very narrow. There's plenty of cars moving through. How would we deal with that limited space? Or you have more space here, but generally a inhospitable environment, and what side of the road would we need to be on? These are all things that we'll be thinking about. So then finally, you know, the trail is not just A to B, even though I showed it that way on the map. It's an experience, and you know, Tool really focuses on a concept of path as place. We want the path to be a great place to be. We also want it to connect you to places you want to be. So where do you want to go? What are your points of interest? Be they functional for your commute or recreational? You know, there are lots of different opportunities in Westfield for where this path could take you. So would love to get your thoughts on that during the discussion. But just briefly on next steps, again, we're going to take your input from tonight and kind of complete our existing conditions assessment. We're doing a write-up for the city and use that to inform a development of trail route alternatives. And then we'll be, again, taking those back to you in mid to late January. So again, here's the survey. And once we start the discussion, I'm going to put that direct link in the chat. But if you have questions once the survey is closed, or any thoughts you can't get into the survey now, but you think of later, you do have an email address, engineering@cityofwestfield.org, that you can contact with thoughts about this project. So with that, love to start a discussion. We really welcome any and all comments. We just put up a few questions here as a prompt. You know, where do you go currently? Do you ride a bike or walk? And what is your experience in the places that you go? Where do you want to go? I'd particularly love to hear from any parents or guardians of children or even adolescents, or kids, if we had them on the call, to know, you know, would you take a trail to school? Where would you expect that it would be leading you, and what do you see as some of the problems getting around? So with that, I'm going to open it up to discussion, and let me exit out here. I'm going to stop sharing. I think what we'll do is I'm going to ask people to raise their hand digitally. And so basically, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see reactions, and press reactions, you'll see a raise hand function. And what we'll do is I've got the participants panel open, and I'm just going to go down the list and call people's names and have you unmute yourself. And then we'll give you a chance to comment. So you've got Pete, starting us out. Salamone?
Yeah, Salamone.
Salamone.
On the southern part of the trail, which goes into Connecticut, there's a limited access highway, and the state DOT decided that they would put a tunnel underneath the highway. That's probably something that should be considered for the mass pike.
Well, I don't know.
Yep, I think we can consider that. And just so you know, I am writing notes, so I'll be nodding my head and looking off to the side. See no other hands up for now. Other comments, questions?
Well, I don't know.
Quinn, go ahead.
So one of the problems I really see with encouraging bike use, and this isn't just limited to whatever the particular connecting road we're talking about right now. One of the main issues is drivers really aren't that concerned about it. Okay, pretty much every driver I see either is on their phone or they're not really paying attention as they're driving. So when I'm biking on like the side of the road, the bike lane. It's really not protected. There's no separation between me and the driver. And if I come across someone who's like on their phone and they just happen to drift off, that's my life. It's really not safe. And I feel like that's one reason why a lot of people aren't encouraged to bike and really reach somewhere like the Greenway. And obviously bikes aren't allowed on sidewalks or anything. That's for pedestrians. So if we can have protected bike lanes and just some type of small barrier or change in road material to elevate it even, to show that separation and difference to kind of protect bikers, that would really help for encouraging what we would want to do, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That is actually developing vertical and horizontal separation is something that Tool really focuses on doing in all of our projects. So thank you. We'll go to Chris.
So this is really one of my favorite trails, and I now live in Northampton, moved here 2 years ago, and one of the things I really like to do is ride from here all the way down into Connecticut and back. Very sorry about the phone ringing in the background, but I'm going to ignore that. And to do that, the real challenge is between sort of the Southampton, East Hampton area and the river in Westfield. A lot of that, the roads are really fine. Scenically, I'll often take East Mountain Road on the east side of the airport, which is really beautiful, but it's narrow and people like to drive 50 miles an hour in Brigade there. And so the issue isn't so much driver inattention, it's just that there isn't enough space there to have cars easily passing bikes. So you really actually have to ride pretty far out in the lane and make people purposely pass you. Going more like the proposed direction here, taking 10 and going up the west side of the airport, there's actually a lot of space there. I mean, it's a very hostile car kind of environment. It feels very barren and industrial, but there is a huge amount of shoulder space so that once you're north of the Mass Pike interchange, it's really not unsafe. It just has this kind of hostile feeling. But the problem there is getting up the hill from the river to about where the Mass Pike is. That's 2 lanes, it's curved, there's no shoulder. There is a sidewalk on one side, which I'll admit I've ridden, but it's kind of, it's a short problem there. And I think that that's maybe the direction in which this study is focusing. The one thing I would like to say about that is that protecting a lane with a physical barrier causes a huge problem in the winter because it means that the bike lane doesn't get plowed. And I've gone and ridden miles and miles and miles in Hampshire County, Berkshire County, etc. in like February when the roads are clean and dry, but the trails, you can't even get between Northampton and East Hampton because they don't get maintained in winter. So the minute we start talking about something that is not just a summertime recreational amenity, but an alternate transit route, having it useful in the winter is really, really important. And, you know, I understand the beauty of something like the Columbia Greenway trail running south from Westfield, that, you know, it's its own thing through the woods, it's isolated, there's no cars anywhere until you get to the, you know, the major road crossings. And that has a huge role for, you know, families with kids. Love to ride with my niece and nephew. But in terms of actual transit, a lot of what's important is finding the particular spots on roads that are real problems versus like the neighborhood roads that really aren't bad. I mean, if I take from the river, if I take Paper Mill or Union over in Paper Mill and go up East Mountain Road itself is really bad because it's this cut through and everybody just flies down that. But once I'm north of 202, continuing that up into East Hampton Center, it's fine. It's, you know, there's shoulder, it's space, it feels comfortable. Very occasionally you get a car who's just nasty, but most of the time that's fine. Whereas the real problem is the place where the only route to cycle is also everybody's way to drive to work, and, you know, they're impatient, they want to go fast. And so I think the real key, where there can't be this beautiful isolated trail through the woods, the real key is to find the connections that are practical, that are year round, and that mean that cyclists and drivers aren't competing for the same pavement space, but there doesn't necessarily have to be a fence between them. Just that's been my experience trying to get, you know, between the gap and the trail to ride the whole trail the last 2 years. And I think that those particular, up the hill to the Mass Pike and that, so.
Thank you. No, that's all good thoughts. And just so people know, one thing that we'll be talking about with the city and with other stakeholders is kind of some of the maintenance implications and what is possible there. So next person will be Craig.
Good evening. I've been waiting for this for probably 20 years. Thank you for coming to it. This is a long time coming. Let me get some names straight here, just so you're all clear on the finished document. There is no such thing as the Central Mass Rail Trail. Central Mass Railroad was the original name of the 100-mile corridor across the state, which is now becoming the longest, most rail trail in the Northeast United States. The original name was Mass Central Railroad. After it went bankrupt, it became the Central Mass Railroad. There was never a Central Mass Rail Trail. It's Mass Central Rail Trail, as you can feel and sense the difference in the name for importance. The Central Mass name was named by a bankruptcy court, which succeeded in driving it into bankruptcy a second time. Don't repeat that. The Southampton project is known as the Southampton Greenway. The Hampton Rail Trail was voted down in 1996. We went back in 10 years later in 2006 and resurrected the project under the moniker Southampton Greenway. Yes. And 3 months ago, the state legislature approved them using CPA dollars to buy the dead railroad in Southampton. I think you're aiming too low here. And I say that from the point of view that the obvious choice is using the dead railroad all the way through to the north side of Westfield and using the active railroad. There is now legislation that approves it. These recreation statutes have approved and encouraged rail with trail in Massachusetts.
Right.
DOT has called it forward as something that they are looking forward for more projects to fund, not to hide from, but to fund. And this should be a conversation. There's over 150 underway right now or operational right now in the United States. There's at least 6 operational right now in Massachusetts, including minute interval headways on commuter rail lines, including Jersey. They're everywhere here. To not use this line is aiming low.
Yes.
A lot of disappointment, a lot of folks, and it'll actually diminish the use of this corridor greatly. I can't imagine. It would be fine to have funding to redo Route 10, 202, but believe me, there's not going to be a lot of use. The use will terminate in the mid part of Westfield, and it'll be dropping off like a stone. There will not be major use along Route 10-202. Thank you. Thank you for hosting this meeting tonight.
Thank you. And just so everybody knows, right now we have no determined route through our A to B points. So the rail lines are definitely in the window of possibility. What goes north of this particular project area, it's up for discussion through other projects probably, but definitely point taken on using rail. Go to Eric next.
Hey there, Craig kind of beat me to it. I was wondering why there wasn't much discussion about the original railroad alignment. Yeah, because the state highways do not provide a good user experience. And yeah, that definitely should be aggressively investigated, I would hope. And I don't know where Southampton, what they're doing. I thought they were staying along the railroad right of way. But I mean, it's beautiful out there. It's a great experience. I don't know why. I'm hoping that it's an act of last resort to not use it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. To Jeff.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. And I just want to do a quick shout out to everybody that's on the call. Many of you know me. I was a founding member of the Friends of the Columbia Greenway Rail Trail back in, I guess it was 2009 or so. So thanks for carrying this project forward to everybody that has remained involved. I guess I will round out the triumvirate and give a huge shout out to Craig Della Penna for saying eloquently, really the point that I wanted to drive home. I would encourage us to take a look at, and my memory's not doing too well right now, but it seems to me there was original discussion back in the day of looking at a route that sort of followed along Montgomery Road out towards the high school, down Russellville Road out to the Brickyard Ponds area and connecting to Southampton Road. Don't mistake me when I say that I'm a huge fan of complete streets. And I think I always would encourage the city and any town to take a look at that. I think that should absolutely be included as part of enhancements to the 10 and 202 corridor anyways. But to Stephanie, your point earlier that you made in beginning your remarks for this presentation this evening, one of the things that I think has always made this project so attractive and is the fact that it is indeed an experience to ride through Westfield. And I think following that original route that we had discussed, one that goes down Russellville Road into the Brickyard Ponds area, I think presents that unique opportunity. You know, perhaps we look at, as we have done with Western Avenue, look at down the road, creating some connectors to schools or other places. So anyways, just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Stephanie, can I just quickly, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi, Jeff. Good to see you again. And I just want to say that we are definitely considering all of those, you know, connections beyond just the trail itself, you know, school
Awesome.
connections and neighborhood connections. So
Great. Good to see you, Matt. Mark, when are you going to retire, by the way?
Too soon for us.
Very soon, Jeff, very soon.
Let's go to Carmel.
Hi, thank you, Stephanie, and nice to see you, Jeff. By way of introduction, I also want to say thank you to Mark for convening this meeting tonight. I'm the current chair of the Friends of Columbia Greenway Rail Trail, and many of our board members are on the call as well. We have a keen interest in the continuation of our trail once it's completed at, you know, the bridges are completed and it goes all the way over to Orange Street to the Esplanade. And like Jeff was just speaking a minute ago about what we have been envisioning, you know, one of our mission is to blaze new trails and safe trails for bike and pedestrian friendly Westfield. And that's, as everyone knows, a lot easier said than done. But we really do have a keen interest in connecting as we could, because it seems to make a lot of sense to veer away from Route 10 and 202 and have a way of having bike paths, multi-use paths that connect, you know, the high school, Southampton Road School, you know, the various neighborhoods that are up on Pachasik, Notre Dame Street, all those areas where they, you know, it's pretty, you know, those neighborhoods are pretty dense. There's a lot of families up there, and it would just be a really great way to connect those people to a thoroughfare that's off-road and safe for them. So, we're really excited to see what the options will be, and what's, the most feasible, but also really advocating that the city of Westfield continue to support these trails being built, because it just means so much for the entire community. It seems like we're maybe halfway there or a third way there, but what we're talking about is, as you said, Stephanie, very, very complicated by the turnpike and by all of the other roadways. So we just look forward to seeing what's going to come of this feasibility study.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Whoever is under A. Dorsey.
Hello, good evening. That would be me. My name is Andrew Dorsey. I, local resident, actually live on Southampton Road here in Westfield, and very appreciative of Stephanie and all of the members here on the board to put this all together for tonight. It's great listening to everyone with their point of view. I think with the last 3 or 4 members who spoke here, I'll go back to Carmel. The area is very dense up by the high school. That's a great place to make sure that the rail trail connects. Just as Craig had said before, there's those funding that allows us to use the old rail trail, or the old train track rail. That puts us a little bit farther down the line with money and costs. Butting into Route 10 as it goes north or comes south on the side of the road just seems like it would be into people's property. We'd be dealing with easements. We'd be biting into people's front yards, changing everything on the street. It kind of limits what we can do with the snow. And what Craig said early on was great. Just utilizing the existing railway would be, I think, a great thing. But also Carmel mentioned that the highway does present a really difficult situation going over or going through the intersection of the turnpike entrance would be quite the difficult situation. Over as you go up 10 north to Sheldon's Ice Cream, there's the subtle brook right there as well that we would want to kind of almost be right in that area where Sheldon's makes that cross again over that subtle stream, and then we'd come up 10 and meet the existing rail trail up there. I think that all is capturing the community's denseness, but not going too far out into the woods, the wooded areas that were, the wooded areas are great to bring people out into. That's what's going to drive these people out of their homes. Say, let's go and see the outdoors. But just actually veering the trail back in to make sure it gets connected right and is on budget and not just going all sorts of ways. This is one of my thoughts and processes here, but just wanted to mention that. Thank you all for your time here, and have a great.
Mark, throw something in here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Look, just listening and appreciating what I think people are saying. I was hoping maybe I could just run through some of the parameters that we are facing and just update people on the Southampton Road project. I mean, maybe could I screen share if that would be okay? Can I do that?
Yeah.
Yes. Here we go. Can I do this? Share. Hey, okay. Look at me. All right. So here's pretty much the project area that we're talking about. And we're talking down here by the river. And again, getting from the river to this Southampton Road corridor. So as Mr. Dorsey indicated, it is a significant undertaking trying to put a separated multi-use trail along Southampton Road, but it's one that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through the Mass Department of Transportation is undertaking. So they are working on putting in a 10-foot separated multi-use trail on the west side of Southampton Road to extend from north of the turnpike to north of North Road. And that's about half of the distance from the turnpike to Sheldon Ice Cream, where Southampton's bike trail is anticipated to connect to Route 10. It does a number of things as far as
trail.
pedestrian and bicycle accommodation. It connects, as you can see, some significant neighborhoods with destination points of schools, work, recreation, and so forth between the airport and so forth. I mean, so putting a trail along here connects destinations with source. So, and this is already in the work. So it's something then we're just looking then, how do we tap into that? Some of the suggestion was use the old rail bed that comes in through Southampton, and Jeff had mentioned, yes, years ago we had improved Route Road and some width, not knowing where Southampton's trail was going to come across the border, so there is a potential with a rail up in that crosses the border in Southampton, and I think that's somewhere right in here. So this is active rail all the way to North Road. Beyond this, it's not active, and so it's suitable if for conversion to a multi-use trail off road. But as you can see, that there's nothing along the way, and it doesn't really connect to anything either. It's a long off road. It could potentially be very aesthetically pleasant, but again, it doesn't connect destination with source. Route Road does have some businesses and some residential, but not as much as Southampton Road, obviously. It's a bit more effort, and certainly not something that we're forgetting, but understand that the railroad south of North Road is active. I do appreciate that currently there is more discussion that, there should be cohabitation, but you really, it comes down to what is the property owner's perspective, and how does that work? And certainly we're hoping potentially there will be some common effort with the railroad, and we'll certainly investigate that as we move forward. But there's a real difficulty down in the urban center here with the railroad, because as you can see, we're talking a rail yard, okay? And then we're talking some rather tight spaces of brook crossings. There's a bit of, and then there's no connectivity from the railroad to residential neighborhoods. Now that could be looked at and investigated. We have looked at, using the current Twist Street crossing. This is the Twist Street transfer station, former landfill, using the dams, Armbrook Dam, Powder Mill Brook Dam here and Armbrook Dam here to connect to the neighborhoods on either side with high school and middle school, and having that synergy between the two. So that's, I'm sure, something that they'll be looking at. And there's some nice play there. That's aesthetic and going through some open areas and as well serving as a connection. So coming down to it, then there's difficulties if we're talking the railroad, but we're certainly going to be looking at those. I just opened this up, Stephanie. I guess as the conversation moves forward, if we want to look into a little further, I'd be happy to try and zoom into some of these areas and see what some of the particulars are. But anyways, I don't mean to monopolize the conversation. So thank you for the time.
No, I think that's very helpful. And yeah, I think we can, just from my experience being out in Westfield already, I think it's safe to say that, we're looking both west and east at what are the different alternatives on either side of the railway and including it. We have a new couple hands up. Those who have their hands up, whose names who've already spoken, I'll come around to you if your hand is still up later. But let's go with Aaron for now. Hey
there. Thanks for all the information so far. I just wanted to chime in real quick, actually. I am on the Southampton Greenway committee, and I just figured I'd add a little info here. We're doing everything we can. Obviously, we're probably looking as if we're well behind the curve, and it's taking a long time for the town to really shape up. We have made some good progress. We've got some funding, and it looks like I should probably knock on some wood, but we may be looking ahead to some construction from the East Hampton Rail Trail connection down to Sheldon's, where it meets Route 10. Hopefully to take advantage of some construction funding in FY24. So I'm hopefully leading the charge on that to really take advantage of things within the next couple of years. Now, where it meets Route 10, and if you continue west, that's Brickyard Road, which the train tracks actually go behind people's houses and over driveways of people's houses. It's extremely close to a lot of residences. So I personally feel like that's a losing battle. And I think the idea of staying parallel to Route 10, heading south to Westfield is a great idea. And personally, I feel the more room, the better between any riding or pedestrian area and Route 10. I just think that's safe and more attractive. So I'm all for that idea. And I just wanted to offer up if anyone wants additional info or wants to contact me for Southampton progress, feel free. Thank you.
And Susan.
Hi. Thank you, everybody, for joining in this meeting. I wanted to talk a little bit about my area. I am in the new condos on Lock House that are on the corner of Twiss. We have 6 duplexes, and right next to us is a large townhouse rental area of Forest Glen. And this whole area around here is a combination of residential and a lot of industrial. There's also the dog bark. We have the turnpike running right over along Twiss, and the dog bark is just on the other side of that. And because there's so much industrial here, we have 1 million trucks going through constantly. So there's no sidewalks down Lock House or Arch. Well, a few, I think, on the other end of Lock House, very close to North Elm. But on the Arch part of it, to head out towards Wendy's area, there's no sidewalk there. So we're basically landlocked unless you're driving. So what we're looking for is greater utility as far as someplace to walk and someplace to bike, and anything that will help us get more safely towards downtown or Southampton would be great. If it went along anywhere near where we can walk, that would be great. Trying to literally cross Arch Road is, in Lock House, is taking your life in your hands. And the shoulders are extremely narrow. We have the railroad running along Arch. So it's kind of a tight area. And just to kind of explain how this area is, if we could get something through here somewhere with some kind of dedicated trail, it just would be a big help to everybody in this area. And I think maybe some people think this is kind of a more spread out residential area, and it is further out, but right here it's really tight and there's a lot of people. And I think the rest of the people here would really love to be able to actually walk somewhere, because right now we just can't. So if that would be a consideration, that would be great.
It's a consideration. Thank you for all that info.
Thank you.
Jonathan.
Hi, thank you for your time and for having this meeting. I'd also like to say that I serve on the board of directors of the Friends of the Columbia Greenway Rail Trail as the Director of Planning and Development. So I'm keenly interested in seeing how this process plays out. And one of the things that I think about as we think about how we do this is, safety and comfort. I think that the best multi-use paths are ones that people really feel safe and comfortable on. And I feel like that comes from I think the paths that provide the best level of safety and comfort are ones that are physically separated, both horizontally and vertically. So I hope that as a result of this, we can determine a path that has that, adequate separation from motor traffic, because I feel like that's sort of the best outcome. And related to that, one of the areas that, brings me concern is sort of right at the southern end at Women's Temperance Park, where you have the CSX rail tracks that sort of stand right in front of you east to west. And I'm not exactly sure how you would accomplish getting around them, but I know at least in Northampton, they built a tunnel under the tracks that are served by Amtrak trains that are heavily used. And I know from me personally, biking through there both before and after that construction, tunneling under those tracks made a huge difference in my own personal comfort and relative safety. And I hope that, as we approach this problem, like the Pike, in crossing this big barrier, that we can come up with a way similar, maybe like that, tunneling underneath, so that people feel safe and comfortable. So thank you.
Thank you. John Tassinari.
Hi, Stephanie. I too am with the Friends of the Columbia Greenway Rail Trail. I'm the treasurer. I've been with the group about 10 years. And we've been working real closely with Mark, looking at some of the alternatives. And as everybody can see from the discussion, the real challenge is Temperance Park to getting up north of the turnpike. We have actually done extensive research on some of the alternatives, most notably trying to connect the high school to Southampton School. That area entertains 2 dams, and we've had conversations with the Conservation Committee. So just so you're aware, there is a lot of work that's going to be done on those dams to bring them up to spec over the next couple of years. They're not opposed to entertaining a right of way over them. And it's a fairly heavily used area today. We've also had conversations with some of the other stakeholders along the railroad owned by the Pioneer Valley Railroad. They actually run about 10, 12 active trains through that Swiss Street area every day. And there's challenges in getting through there, but we had some ideas. And we did a pretty thorough walk around with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, Jeff McCullough, and the safety person responsible for Pioneer Valley Railroad, as well as some of the owners. And we spent 2 to 3 hours discussing and doing some site surveys. So they are also willing to work with us. What I found interesting was Craig Delapena's comments about the sharing of rail use with the multi-path type of setup. And I think that anything that can be done along those lines so that 2 could coexist would make that whole section that we're looking at there feasible. It's a beautiful area, and it is heavily used today, and I think it's definitely worth serious consideration. And we've actually looked at some ways to get underneath the turnpike. We have some crazy ideas Mark can share with you, but we feel pretty good about the possibility of actually entertaining going through the Twist Street area. And so if you had any questions or wanted to discuss it, we've got a committee on the Columbia Greenway that's been looking at this, and we can share some of our ideas.
Yeah, sounds like a discussion is needed. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Back up here. I am seeing repeat names. I'm going to start at the top of those. Craig, did you have another comment? Hearing none. Jeff, did you have another comment?
Yeah, it was more of just a clarifying question for Mark Crissati and with maybe an assist from Craig, if Craig is still on the call. So Mark, question to you is, if we were to pursue, our original idea of going out Montgomery Road and sort of that side of town, it sounds like Mass DOT is moving forward with some form of a trail regardless. But it sounded like Craig was hinting at some potential funding sources. Are the two mutually exclusive? In other words, would it not make sense to have maybe Mass DOT and whoever the folks that Craig mentioned in the same room as a potential conversation?
So, Jeff, I think you'll find on Southampton Road that's going to be going forward just to address Mass DOT's priorities as far as complete streets, as you mentioned. Okay. Somebody had mentioned earlier that there's a lot of pavement on Southampton Road. But if you take a look at it, I mean, you have one lane in each direction. You have like an 8-foot shoulder on either side. And initially, Mass DOT's perspective was, well, we can convert that to a travel lane for bicyclists. Problem is that there's a lot of turning movements that occur in the roadway. And when those occur, motorists use that shoulder to get around people trying to take a left turn. Which if you're inviting bicyclists there, now you're inviting injury. So Mass DOT then quickly realized that no, that wasn't going to work. Okay, yes, it did warrant a separated multi-use trail, and that the west side was the most conducive for that. It already had sidewalks to a large extent. The residential areas are largely on the west side. And they will be introducing a center multi-use trail, a multi-use lane in the highway. So the pavement that's there won't get widened much, if at all, and things will improve anyways. But they'll be moving forward with the separated multi-use trail irrespective. As far as the railroad use, and I think Craig Delapenne sent me a number of things, and I certainly need to get up to speed, and certainly I'll be looking to others to help me with that, tool design included, as to what are the parameters around using the railroad. But again, I guess my perspective and my experience with the city is, look, there's a property owner there, and if they're not, don't feel the warm snugglies, it's going to be a real problem. It'll just stop it. Okay. And then the question is, what are you gaining? Where's it going? Is it going to do what you're looking for it to do? Yes, it'll be a nice ride along a railroad through some countryside, but are you connecting residences with desired destination points? So the questions to be answered. And then there's as also mentioned, I mean, there's some constraints. I mean, you've got, bridge crossing over railroads that are really some tight areas that I'm not sure we can get around that and still maintain the railroad's activities. So, I mean, there's a lot to be had. I'm happy to be having conversations with the railroad. Nobody expects, something to come out of this and we go, oh yeah, there it is. And it's just going to happen with one project. It's probably going to be a series of efforts and probably a long-term undertaking, but at least to come to a point of, okay, well, what is, what route here does the most for us and is where we want to then focus our efforts going forward. But anyways, I hope that answers your question, Jeff. And
can I just add that if you go, and I can send a link in the chat if you want, but if you go to the city's website, cityofwestfield.org, if you go to departments, you go to active engineering department, active projects, there is a page for the Southampton Road improvements. And there's a link there for the 25% design submission. If you want to look at those plans, it's only 25%, but it might just give you an idea of what they're looking to do.
Great. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Matt.
Yeah. So Chris, we'll go back to you before we go back to John.
So
you know, the idea of using the railroad is really neat, but it goes way out to the west on its own. And my reaction to it is that the railbed route doesn't really accomplish much unless it connects all the way through to the current end in at the East Hampton Southampton line. I mean, it's sort of an all or nothing kind of thing, because the stretch on Route 10 in between is not nice. I mean, Route 10 up to where sort of 10 and 202 split at the north corner of the airport has space, but north of that there isn't space. So I want to speak a bit more to the sort of the road adjacent lane design, both further up on Route 10 in I guess Southampton, and also at a very, very similar spot in Farmington, right at their airport down in Connecticut in their trail gap. A bit of bidirectional path got built on one side of the road, and that's actually extremely dangerous, but deceptively so. A lot of people, you know, when they're cycling, we're really afraid that we're going to be hit by a car approaching behind, but that's not statistically what happens. Statistically, the crashes are at intersections with turning vehicles turning across the path of a cyclist they didn't see. And so the comment earlier about, yes, there's shoulder space on Southampton Road beside the airport that's actually in the project area, but drivers use that to turn. That's true, and it's a concern. But it's much better that somebody turning is merging into the same pavement that the cyclists are on, and merging is a traffic flow, rather than cyclists thinking that we have this reserved lane, and then suddenly, at the last instant, we come in conflict with a turning driver who wasn't paying any attention to us because they thought they had their own lane. So that there's a kind of unfortunate reality that whenever bikes are routed beside a road, they really need to be going in the same direction as the traffic on their side of the road. And there needs to be the mutual awareness of, hey, I'm in my lane and you're in your lane, but we're on the same road. Whereas when there's this like, oh, I'm on the trail, I don't have to deal with cars. And then the drivers are like, oh, that's not part of the road, it doesn't matter. Those are the setups for the fatal crashes with turning vehicles and cyclists. And there's this issue where you put up a fence and you get this deceptive sense of safety, but you actually have enhanced danger at the intersections. You put this construct bidirectionally on one side of the road, and now you not only have cyclists arriving with an unexpected speed, but you also have them arriving from an unexpected direction. So it really creates all the reasons why riding on a sidewalk is very dangerous, but it encodes that dangerous behavior as the actual expected behavior, which is problematic. I mean, you can legalize sidewalk riding, but it doesn't make it safe.
There's a lot there to address, but I'm not going to take the time to do it right now. I do appreciate the thoughtfulness that I heard behind those comments. For now, I'm going to bounce to John and then to Craig. John, are you with us? We'll go to Craig. Let's see if.
Which John are you referring to? I'm sorry.
You, John Tessenard.
Oh, I didn't know I had my hand up. Okay. Yeah, you know, the previous comment was kind of this all or nothing with the railroad. There's a lot of stakeholders involved here. Not only is there the local Pioneer Valley transit, but CSX also has active rail that goes and interconnects that whole rail yard to the east-west, the major east-west rail. So there's a lot of challenges. It's pretty much an off-limit area to go through the rail yard. And if you continue north and, you know, in an area that is really not one you're supposed to be at, there's like a 50 or 60 foot berm that just entertains the railroad. And it's just really, it's not even an option really at this point to try to get through that area. But the area we've been focused on is more by the turnpike and trying to find a way through there at the Twist Street, because there is an existing road and intersection with stop signs and you know, some kind of alert about the train. So that is one area we've spent time focusing on, but it is not by, you know, the be all end all to get through there, but just another option. But if we can entertain the schools and keep it, I know it's traveling west of the corridor that MassDOT is doing. It entertains a lot of neighborhood and a lot of access to safe transit. So that's the only comment I had on that. But again, there is going to be work done on the dam. So if that is in your design, it is a feasible thing to do. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Go ahead, Craig.
Sorry, I dropped off there. I had a tech problem and I had to re-sign in. So I did hear my name mentioned a few times. So let me zoom this up in altitude. Buckle your seatbelts. This is the longest interstate trail in the Northeast United States. I really think we have to be aiming high here. I know this is a project sponsored by the city of Westfield. That's part of the problem here, in that the host community will narrow it down and take it down to ground level. It may not be up to speed on what is really going on around us. I put out a newsletter, a free monthly newsletter. It goes out to over 12,000 people, several hundred policymakers. And all it is a newsletter that I hired an assistant and we pull down a Google search every day. Newspaper stories about rail trails, bikeways, greenways, rails to trails, whatever.
Craig, we may have lost you. You're frozen. I think we've lost your connection. So Craig, we've lost your connection. If you can still hear me, I'm going to move it back to Chris in the meantime. If Chris, you had something else to add.
Well, I didn't actually say I had my hand raised, but I will just take a moment to say, per Craig's comment, last summer I started in New Haven and I rode home to Northampton. And, it is a wonderful interstate route. And the two challenge areas are one in Connecticut that's being dealt with, but is actually really not that bad on roads already. The main problem is it has some hills that a rail trail doesn't normally have. But the greatest challenge on that route is getting between the Westfield River and the top of the airport. And whether that is, the discussed project area, probably trying to get halfway up the airport on the Route 10 side, or something on East Mountain Road. I mean, Craig talked about here's this interstate resource, but implementing it comes down to the local level. And I really have to say that, that mile and a half or whatever from the Westfield River to halfway up the airport, that is the greatest challenge on the entire 80 whatever mile route. Thank you.
Let me continue on here. Basic theme was that these projects are critically important for the future. These are 21st century projects. What happened in New York, not too far away from us, was when Governor Cuomo saw that what one trail brought $250 million a year to the state of New York and the communities along a long trail, he commanded DOT to build 400 miles in 4 years. That was in 2017. When that started, I launched this newsletter. It is now in the top 10% of all the thousands of newsletters hosted by Constant Contact. It's like sharks attacking this newsletter. It's got all the stories that you don't see what's going on. There are scores of railway trail projects. There are railroads who are inviting these because the recreational use statutes have changed. This is big. This is bigger than anything anybody could ever imagine. The amount of use on this trail corridor with scheduled rail service at either end and in the middle, at each end at New Haven, North End, and Boston, Northampton and Boston, this is going to be several 100,000 visitors a year. We can't be putting them out on Route 10. They're going to be disappointed. They won't head north of Westfield downtown. I'm telling you that right now. That will be a disappointment to the regional tourism agencies. There'll be a disappointment to DOT, who's been asking for more rail with trail projects. This is big. We got to aim big. I'm reassembling the dead railroad between Northampton and Boston. I actually own 3 bridges and block sales to adjoining landowners to shock the system, which now this is the most important project underway. At the same time that Southampton voted the trail down in the mid-90s, Belchertown voted it down. Belchertown is now on board. You probably didn't know that because it's not really in the newspapers. But they got $200,000-$300,000 grants in consecutive years. There's a 501c3 that I run is about to give them a donated engineering survey on a bridge that's a critical piece of this 100-mile dead railroad that no one's looked at in 40 years. This is the densest network of dead steam railroad corridor in North America is within 125 miles of Westfield in a circle. This is unbelievable. There's nothing else like it. It's only dead steam railroad corridors, not dead trolley corridors. That would double the mileage. What we have here is simply unmatched. And part of the problem is we're looking at it so far down in altitude, we don't see the big picture here. So I would love to help foster a conversation with the Pioneer Valley Railroad. I used to market rail freight. I operated 2 of the Northeast's largest railroad transloading facilities. I've been involved in rail with trail projects. I was on the first team that actually pulled this together. And Stephanie, I know several of your higher ups there at Tool, and you tell them you saw me here tonight. So thank you for coming all this way here. I'll let you all continue on. I don't want to hog you. I love this conversation.
Craig, I do think you have a question from Quinn. Quinn, do you want to ask your question aloud?
Sure, Craig. I don't know if you saw in the chat. By the way, thank you, Stephanie. Craig, since you said it earlier, like you were knowledgeable about the subject, what kind of condition is this old rail infrastructure in? What would it take to reappropriate it, if anything, to your knowledge? Or you're just aware that it's there and you are really passionate about the potential?
I used to work for Pinsley Railroad Company, which owns the Pioneer Valley Railroad. Pinsley was one of the country's first short line railroad operators. And so I know John Levine. I've known him for 30 years. And so I know all the people there. I've been in the background helping Southampton get underway. Had weekly conversations. Representative Lindsay Sabadoza, I talked with her weekly to get things going there. That railroad is pretty active. It's actually the densest railroad in terms of traffic, probably in 100 miles of here. They have a lot of traffic on a short section of trail. And that section from near the east-west main line, north towards Southampton, that's like 3-ish miles, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. But the northernmost traffic customer there is a propane dealer. If you pay attention to propane dealers, some of them are on trailers. Why would you think that? Why are they in a trailer? It's because they don't plan to be there long. They're very sensitive to pricing and where their customer base is. And if you look at propane dealers, you're going to see a substantial number of them in trailers because they don't plan to be there. That traffic is there right now. There's other industrial users in the area. And I was made aware of a big new glamorous project coming forward in the north side of Westfield. That will not be a rail-served facility. It's going to be a high-tech facility. High-tech facilities don't use 19th century transportation uses. That's the problem. We are in transition. It may be another 20, 30, maybe a couple of generations operational on the north side of Westfield, but I'm sure that this could be built out. It may not be cheap, but it could be done. And I think that a feasibility study really has to look at this. I talked to top people at Mass DOT today. Are we still doing rail to trail? Yes, we're looking for more projects. We want these. We know that these are transitionary projects. We know this. These work. They work. So please look into it. I'd be happy to be helpful to you. You know, I'm a realtor. I specialize in the sale of houses near rail trails. There's a 21st century idea. But I'm busy with that. I'm busy reassembling the dead railroad across the state. And so I'd be happy to help here if needed, but just use me as a resource as you need. That's fine with me. I don't charge. Thank you.
Okay, my question was just about what condition it's in. Is it good? Is it bad? Do we need to rebuild everything? Just brief, or you don't know. Sorry.
The corridor is in good enough condition for small or for slow track speed. I think it might be like class 1, maybe class 2, which might mean 20 miles an hour. They maintain it well. They're proud of their track. They do a good professional job. Safety is job. They're not like other railroads who will go unnamed tonight that drove their business into the ground. Pioneer Valley Railroad does a good job. Westfield should be proud of having them there. They're honorable people. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Craig and Quinn. All right, back to Chris.
So I think maybe there was possibly people talking about different parts of the railroad there. I mean, Craig said that the part that Pioneer Valley is using is, you know, in repair and everything. Then there's the part coming down from Southampton and I guess crossing into Westfield at some point. One point last summer, I went out Montgomery Road and I sort of saw some of that. But I sort of feel like the rail route option is neat if it's complete. But in terms of this project, we were sort of given an endpoint at Southampton Road Elementary. And I'm not quite sure how the rail ties into that. I mean, if trail along the rail is being built, the disused rail is being built down from Southampton, that's great. And I'm not sure quite how this project connects to that, because particularly north of where North Road and 202 split, Route 10 is kind of narrow. You know, if there's a way to use the rails to get out of the Women's Temperance Park area in Westfield and past the Mass Pike, that's great. I'm not quite seeing how that's connecting over to the school. Maybe some of them mentioned about dams. I'm not real familiar with that area. But I sort of feel like there's this, like, the rail route is great in its entirety, and then there's patching together a solution from streets. And, you know, to Craig's comment, I know that dumping people out on Route 10 is not attractive, but Route 10 alongside the airport is not terrible, and it could be made more friendly. Route 10/202 across the top of the airport, you know, there's plenty of space except right at the interchange. The big difference would be sort of signage normalizing the idea that it's okay to bike on this. There's space, you should use it. Craig mentioned New York, and the North County Trail in New York that later became part of the Empire Trail for a long time had a roughly 2-mile stretch on the shoulder of a 50-mile-an-hour state highway. And I remember the first time I did that, I was like, oh no, you know, I'm doing this. And then I did it and I was like, that's fine. I have my space, they have their space. I have to be careful at that one ramp. They did eventually, since I left New York, move that to its own side of the guardrail. But, you know, it was a highway shoulder, but it was very normalized that it was appropriate to ride there. There were signs there, people did it, and it was 2 miles in a wonderful 48-mile route. So people used it. And you know, if we can reassemble the whole rail corridor, that's wonderful. But I also think that there's a pragmatism. Can we take the bad spots and bridge the bad spots? And so that, you know, if someone's out for a ride with their 10-year-old kid, yeah, maybe they're going to start in Women's Temperance Park or start at Shop and Shop and ride the thing that's purely rail trail. But if someone wants to ride the whole canal route, you know, what are the pain points? Or the woman who spoke earlier, I think it was Susan, about, you know, getting to her housing area. the rail trails are a great recreational thing, but there's also this practical aspect of the roads that are rideable and the roads that are not rideable. And what can we do about the roads that are not rideable to make them rideable? And then people can go the rest of the way on the trails and the roads that are already fine. So it's, you know, it's how do we get north past the Mass Pike up to, yes, about the area of that school. You know, if we can get up to the 202 North Road split, and I believe we can on sidewalks, sorry, on the shoulders. Once you get to Hampton Ponds, Country Road up to East Hampton is actually very, very nice. And it's also a housing area. And that is a much more easterly track. The railroad is to the west. If the railroad gets converted to trail coming down from Southampton, that's great. North Road between 10202 and the railroad, I don't think is quite so great. I did it once. It's a little hilly, but it's possible. It's narrow. So, you know, I think that there is an idealism direction and there's also a pragmatism direction, which I think this project's mandate is a little more aligned with, which is, you know, how do we make it these 2 miles or whatever they are? And ideally that ties in with a Sunday complete rail corridor, but it also just, you know, if it gets rid of the worst part in a current 80-mile route, that's a win. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Well, seeing no more hands, I think we got a lot of really great, thoughtful info. It's clear that there are many people who have been thinking about this, and some of you will be following up with. I really appreciate your time tonight, that you stuck around for nearly an hour and a half.
I don't have anything to ask.
Again, the next step, we're gonna, you know, take the input you've given us tonight, also in the survey, which is the link is copied into the chat. I will copy it again here at the very bottom. You know, please fill that out. Okay, it's not copying the link. Matt, could you please copy the link down because it is not allowing me to do it. It's copying other text. If you please fill that out, we're going to take all that input and carry that forward into route alternatives. And certainly we are going to be talking about a lot of the things that we heard tonight. Mark or Matt, any last thoughts from you? Thank you, Quinn.
So Mark Rosati here. I want to say I did hear what I think is a point that's being made that we're talking about really two different users here. I think Craig was correct in that the city obviously focuses on more local issues of getting the more uncomfortable rider from a destination to a source and vice versa. You know, a mom with kids or a kid on a bicycle, you know, yeah, that's kind of the city's focus. But then there's this other user that's just that is using a big scale, you know, multi-state, you know, traverse, and that the city's focus may not align with that position. But we'll try to take a look at that anyways, and hopefully you'll be there, Craig, to help us along. I hear tunnels. I hear that there's distracted drivers, and I'll totally agree with you on that. Winter use, though, I got to say, is again, it's not something that the city really focuses on. You know, until there's a demand, I don't think you're going to see that. Multi-use trails are plowed, but you know, maybe we need to relook at that. But anyways, good conversation. Thank you.
Can I just add in quick too from engineering department that, you know, we're just starting this, so it's not like we have, I mean, obviously we've had ideas, and all of you in this room have had ideas for a long time on what, you know, how this is going to work. We all knew this was going to be a challenge that we're going to have to face at some point, and here we are. So we are just starting this off. It's not like we've got, we're narrowing down and not considering everything. We will consider everything through this. But like Mark said, we also have to be, we have to, it's feasibility. What's feasible and what makes the most sense. And it's not, we are trying to balance between the users of the entire section, but also the community that's going to use it as well. And so I just want to say don't preclude that we're just already got our minds made up of exactly where it's got to go. And that's why we're here having these discussions to get the full, body of opinions. And so, it's going to be a fun process, I think. And I'm really excited for this next section, just for the challenge and opportunities it presents. So I appreciate everyone's feedback tonight. Thank you.
Thank you all. I've noted the last two questions in the chat. I'm going to say that we're going to come back to that. We will talk a little bit more about maintenance in an upcoming meeting. So with that, thank you all, and we'll see you again in the new year. So happy holidays.
You too. Thank you.